Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Arcpoint Sessions. We've had a little bit of a break, but I think we've got a lot of people joining us soon, so I'm excited to get back into the swing of things. Today, we have a very, very special guest, as he was my first viola professor back in my undergrad in Texas, a very esteemed musician who explores a wide intersection of the viola sound, and we'll get into more of that later. This is Dr. Misha Galaganov. Very wonderful to have you on Arcpoint Sessions.
Thank you so much. It's my honor, Jacob, to be on your really wonderful conversation sessions. Yeah. So I think you wanted to start with just hearing about my background and how I learned to play viola and how I got into music. So I started when I was 5, actually, in Russia. I was born in Russia and I grew up in Russia. And my mother is a pianist and my father is a violinist. And I heard music in my house all the time. My father was the youngest concertmaster in Soviet Union when he became one. And so we had all the time we worked. Actually, I didn't work when I was little. They did in a city called Kislovodsk, which is a spa, a very well-known spa actually in Soviet Union. And my father was concertmaster of symphony orchestra in there, and a lot of artists came to that city to play with symphony orchestra. It was a nice place to go. And several of them actually came to my parents' apartment for dinner or just conversations, and I got to meet and hear all those interesting conversations about music and about other people and artists. And anyway, when I was little, I wanted to be like my parents. And I started playing piano when I was 5. And then I switched to violin also when I was 6. And my father and my mother were my first teachers. And actually, my father continued to be my main teacher through practically until the age of 19, when I switched to viola, which is a different story. And so I went through high school in Soviet Union. Actually, it's very interesting. This music school was different than normal school, and people had to go to music school for 7 years. And then there was an option to apply to specialized high school, to which I also went. And I had good teachers, but my father was main teacher. And so when I was 18 already, getting almost ready to graduate from high school, I was an ambitious violinist, wanting to be a soloist. I was doing okay. I don't know at that stage of my career if I do know. I think I would not have become a soloist. There were some gaps in my technical education, not due to my father's work, but to my own, because I really did not practice a lot. Actually, I was busy with other things. And so one time Viola Virtuoso came and to that high school and played a concert, and he played all violin virtuosic pieces on viola, like Last Rose of Summer, some Paganini caprices. I mean, it was very impressive. The audience went crazy. And I was listening to it and I was thinking, well, if a violinist comes and plays like that, it's actually not that special. I mean, a lot of violinists actually couldn't play like this, but when violists come and play like this, wow. And so I thought, I want the audience to go crazy when I play. And so then I decided maybe I should be a violist. And so my switch, when I graduated from high school and applied to conservatory, I played on violin, but I applied to a viola class to be accepted to conservatory and be a violist. And so I was accepted. I was lucky. It was very strong competition that year. I went to Rostov Don Conservatory. And at first, I was missing E string. Actually, the E string sound that I found so beautifully on my violin right before graduation. But very soon I actually realized that my decision to switch to viola was the best decision I had made in my life because it was suiting my personality so much. And I started loving the sound of viola and I loved the C string. And so I was very happy and I am still very happy that I switched to viola. And that was 19 when I came to conservatory. But when I was 20, the borders in Soviet Union opened, and my family, my parents decided to move out of Soviet Union to explore other opportunities. And so we went to Israel as a family, my sister, I, and my parents. And that started a completely different. I'm grateful to my parents for this move because otherwise I would have been stuck in Soviet Union. Probably would have ended up being in an orchestra somewhere, and probably hating my life. I guess you never know, but I think there was not much of perspective actually there, and I was still ambitious at the time. I still wanted to be a soloist. I'm still ambitious actually, but wanted to be a soloist, and so moving to Israel actually was a great move, and we moved to Jerusalem. And at that time, Mikhail Kugel, who is a wonderful violist and viola virtuoso, he was teaching in Jerusalem Academy. And I started studying with him then, and he was a big influence on me, and I learned a lot from him. And at the same time, because we had to survive in Israel, I started playing with my parents' concerts, like family concerts, and that I think was one of the strongest factors for me to grow as a musician, because my father is just such a wonderful violinist with just such amazing sound, and I was nowhere near his level, and he was very frustrated with me, and I was also very frustrated. So there was this, I was in two personalities, kind of at the same time. One was that I was very full of myself because I thought I was a wonderful violist. And the other one is when I played with my father, I was very far from it. And that inspired me to grow very quickly, I think, in level. And later I used that idea for a festival for amateurs that I created, Chamber Music Roundup, with the idea that amateurs would play with professionals in the same ensembles, and just hearing professional sounds, they would grow up in level. But anyway, so in Israel I was there for 3 years, and then Arkady Fomin came one time. He was a violinist in Dallas Symphony and professor at SMU, and director of an extremely successful music festival at SMU also at the time. And so he came to Israel, and he put an advertisement in Russian newspaper, only in Russian, a newspaper in Israel, and said that there are auditions for his festival. And my friends who played in a piano quartet with me and I went to Tel Aviv to his hotel room and played for him for whatever few minutes what we had. He recorded us on his tape recorder, and then he accepted. I don't remember actually about some of my friends, but I was accepted, and he then called us in the middle of the night and said, talked to my parents and said that he would like to use the tape recording for application for artist certificate to SMU.
Mhm.
Would I agree? Like, why not? Okay, I didn't think the tape was very good. I played okay. I didn't think it was something special, but okay. And so the next thing I know, I was accepted to that program also, and that's how I came to US.
Mhm.
Um, I got my undergrad in Jerusalem Academy with Kugel, and I got to the US to study at SMU with Barbara Sadwigs. She at the time was Barbara Hustis,
Mhm.
but Barbara Sadwigs. And Barbara was completely different personality than Kugel. So with Kugel, I was used to a teacher who would tell me everything, every finger. He would write down all his fingerings and tell me in details how to do everything, how to show. Also, he would play. Barbara had completely different approach, and actually her approach, even though at first I didn't understand it as very helpful, actually her approach was tremendously helpful for me at the time when she was very encouraging and gently directed me uh, with my goals. And she was
Mhm.
helping me, and I learned to think for myself also. That was the time when I actually did think a lot for myself, and that was also very good experience with guidance of Barbara. And before that, I must mention that while I was studying with Kugel, I took a master class with Tabea Zimmerman one time. She was still in her late 20s at the time, and she was coming to Israel a lot because she
Mm.
was married to David Shalom, who
Mhm.
was conductor of Jerusalem Symphony. And so I had a chance to hear her perform a lot. And I played a master class, and I remember she spent 1 hour and a half on only one page from Arpeggione by Schubert.
Mm.
It was very detailed work, wonderful thinking, just a new way for me of thinking about technique and about music, and that was inspirational for me, inspiring.
Yeah.
And we actually talked a few times after that, even though many years later, when I came back and I heard her concert, I went backstage, she already didn't remember who I was because she taught since then so many.
Yeah.
I had a feeling she didn't remember who I was when we talked. I congratulated her, but at that time she was very big influence when I was in Israel, and so I came and I studied with Barbara Sadwigs, and after that I went to Rice and studied with Marta
Mhm.
Katz. And Marta was also really, really wonderful for me. As I understand right now, she was not, some people would not benefit the same way from her teaching, but I think that applies to most teachers.
Right.
So not everybody benefits the same way from the same teacher. But to me, Marta was very helpful and inspiring, and she's a very special personality. So it worked very well, and she helped me both musically and in terms of personality and kind of opening my world a little bit, my eyes to the world, and especially also to chamber music. Her husband, Paul Katz, was also very influential in terms of chamber music, and also Sergio Luca, at the time violinist. He was violin professor, and he taught also Bach seminar. That was, to me, that was also very inspiring. I took his Bach seminar. I learned a lot. There were 4 required sessions. You can't miss one, otherwise you don't get credit. You have to
Mhm.
attend all sessions in a semester. And after I attended one seminar, I really wanted to take it again. And so you have to go and talk to him. He required people to talk to him before signing up. And so I
Mm.
came to him and I said, I would like to take your seminar again, and he kind of jokingly said, Misha, but you already know everything. And I said, well, no, I don't. So I want to learn more. So I took it one more time. I would have taken it again, actually. I mean, he was so knowledgeable about the style, Baroque
Right.
dances, performance, and he was a wonderful violinist. Marta Katz, after I finished my master's and I was starting DMA at Rice, also she suggested that I switch for 1 year to another teacher. And I suggested Sergio Luca because I attended some of his lessons and I liked his very detailed technical approach. But Marta, for some reason, thought that that would not be a good fit, and she recommended Wayne Brooks, who was principal viola in Houston Symphony, and he also taught at Rice. And I took 1 year with Wayne Brooks, which again, Wayne was, I think he was really, he's a talented, very talented teacher. I didn't feel at the time that he was pushing me in anything. I had my ideas. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. He supported me, but his gentle suggestions and gentle directions really helped me to progress. I progressed a lot during that year
Mm.
with Wayne. And I'm very grateful. We still keep in touch with Wayne. I also keep in touch with Marta
Hmm.
and with Barbara Sadviks. So I try to keep in touch with my teachers.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it was good. Rice was very good for me. And while I was at Rice, there was this opportunity that came in Holland where somebody was, Stefan Metz, cellist, was asking Paul Katz if he knows any violas because he wanted to recreate his Orlando quartet in Amsterdam. And so I went to audition, and my audition was very successful, and they actually offered me a job. The audition itself took like 4 months
Mm.
because first I went there, we worked for a few days, and then I came back, then I came back again, and mostly for the summer, and spent time playing with them also at Orlando Festival. It was very good.
Right.
Uh, I decided not to accept the job for various reasons, into which I'm not going to go on this in this conversation.
Fair
Uh,
enough.
so, but it was a good experience, and it also coincided with Young Artist International engagements with Schmieder and Ipalpiti. Edward Schmieder, who worked at Rice, not Rice, SMU. He
Hmm.
continued inviting me to be principal viola in his Ipalpiti orchestra, and I played also in his Ipalpiti ensemble. And so all those years of my studies were good. And I was lucky that right when I was finishing my coursework, several jobs came up, and I applied, and I got the job I have right now, which is at DCU. So does that was a very long answer to your short question about my background.
But I think it's an important lineage there because you it kind of shows like the power of networking. Because was the violist that performed in Russia, Kugel, before you went over to Israel and studied with him, or was that a different violist?
It was Kugel, yes, yeah.
So it's
He
like
he
you
was
found out about
inspiring.
him and
Yes, he was.
got to work with him
Mhm.
there, and then it carried forward this like pattern of you learn about somebody, then you create this interest, you learn from him, and you had connections from SMU that were helping you with artistry and performing even when you weren't there. It's this it shows the web of like what made you you or helped you find out who you were as well, right?
You never know. Yeah, networking is not one of my strong suits. I messed up a lot of opportunities actually because of my either stupidity or of my lack of networking. But when you, yes, well, I see
Yeah.
what you're
It,
saying. Yeah.
it shows the power of taking some risk and moving too, because it's not easy to uproot from overseas and just go to the US. That's a risk that you had to take, and you grew from that. You grew from not sticking around in SMU and going to Rice. You grew from everything, right? You have to make a decision, even though, yeah, like you said, sometimes they're not the right decision or there was a better choice, but the grass is always greener, right? So yeah,
Yes, but
it's
overall, I'm very happy with
yeah.
how it turned out. I had great inspirations when I was in Israel for 4 years. Life in Israel was booming musically also. And when I came to SMU, I had wonderful musicians, friends, some of whom really went on to become like really inspiring musicians in their own right. And yeah, and at Rice, the friendships that I had there and people who I played in a quartet with really great people, as people, and also as musicians. And yeah, I'm very lucky.
Yeah.
I feel, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different interesting points you brought up in there, and I think purposefully so, because you talked about the Bach class, you talked about your father and kind of this duality. But I think let's start with that because um, it kind of coincides with the research that I've done too, in terms of like mental health and music, but it's a different side. Um, because you had mentioned that you had this weird duality of feeling really confident, like, damn, I'm a really good violist, and then also playing with your father made you feel like an imposter, right? That imposter syndrome side of things. And I'm curious, like, what lasting effects have that has that created for you as an artist, right? Because I remember myself as an undergrad, I came into the music scene with like little to no knowledge on how it worked, right? I didn't know much. I knew I had some skills, but it was like a lack of refinement. And then I had a level of intense like confidence of like, yeah, I'm good, But even then, it was, you step out into the scene and you're like, am I though? Am I really anything that's going to mean anything to anybody? And that whole imposter syndrome can carry through and really, I mean, screw people up as an artist and make people decide to do other things. So I'm curious, as someone who had a esteemed violinist as a father, what kind of mental hurdles did you deal with growing up? Or
Well,
how did that
actually,
affect you?
it's a good thing you mentioned this. You call it imposter syndrome. That's
Hmm.
probably a scientific psychological term.
Yeah.
Um, I can talk about my bad experiences actually, and the first thing I can say is actually they whatever bad experiences one has, they leave a trace.
Hmm.
So, like for example, in Israel, when I was full of myself, like I say, I wasn't like entirely full of myself, but I had a reason to be proud of my achievements of my playing because I was principal viola in Young Israel Philharmonic, which included a lot of really good players, and I was almost the youngest actually in the group at the time.
Hmm.
And I was there was a professional orchestra that was newly created, chamber orchestra. I was assistant principal or whatever it is. I was sitting on the first stand.
Hmm.
And when they wanted to do Elgar, for example, this piece for quartet and orchestra, I was the one to play it. And so I had some achievements. I was principal viola in school orchestra, so I was kind of thinking, "Oh, I'm good." But
Right.
when I got to, for example, Winter in Jerusalem festival, which is a very strong festival in Israel, I suddenly was not the best in the viola section for whatever reason. But it had a lot of really, really good viola players from all over the world. And I guess by my tape audition, I was assigned to a very good quartet with very good people to play Debussy string quartet. And we came to the first rehearsal, and after that first rehearsal, which I didn't do very well because I wasn't very well prepared, I guess, but we just did a reading. After that, I was gently kicked out of that quartet by
Oh,
other
wow.
people. So I was not even told, but they found another violist and they just did the quartet with them.
Hmm.
And actually, Tabea kind of knew about that. Tabea showed up for coaching with us, I think. I did play that coaching for Tabea. She was later asking me like if I found another chamber music group or something. This kind of thing leaves a trace.
Right.
It was a learning experience for me because I needed to learn that one has to be totally prepared because all the other people probably played that DBC quartet. I never played, and I also didn't spend enough time preparing it.
Hmm.
I was also not very. mm, I had to deal with nerves often. Like that was a big issue for me while performing. And so I had our piano quartet, and often when we would play concerts, I would mess up in some like technical stuff. And so people would actually, well, he has a beautiful sound. He supposedly is a good violist, but he messes up a lot.
Mm.
And so that kind of was also a frustrating and learning experience. And I don't know, to answer your question, how one gets over it. You know, even at Rice, I remember we had a quartet. We had a total disagreement one time in a quartet, one quartet where I played. That
Hmm.
was not my permanent quartet with a friend, with Will Fetkenhoyer and Jeff Ziegler and Michael Arlt, but it was another quartet, and we had totally opposite musical views. But the
Right.
violinist was actually talking, as I found out later, but during the same year, he was talking to other people and he was saying, well, I don't know if Misha is actually a good violist because he cannot say this or he cannot play like that or something like this. So those things affect people
Yeah.
and create certain insecurities which, if directed in the right channel, they help to avoid similar situations. Like, for example, I already knew every time I would play chamber music, I would be scared, which is actually not unusual. Marta Katz told me she was scared when she was playing in Cleveland Quartet, coming to a first rehearsal, for example. And so I was
Hmm.
always worried about being underprepared, and that made me practice more and being over-prepared sometimes.
Yeah.
The way the Russian system of education works, it was a focus mostly on solo playing and much less on chamber music playing and much less on the orchestra playing. So even though I was concertmaster of my high school orchestra on violin, the orchestra experience there is negligible.
Hmm.
And people here in US, their ensemble playing is much stronger. They learn how to play in ensembles from early ages. They hear very well. They know how to prepare. They have experience that helps them. And so, yeah, my experience in chamber music and in orchestra was and sometimes has been inadequate. I mean, I'm compensated by practicing a lot.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you mentioned the upbringing and everything. In the US, I think, I mean, especially in Texas, you know very well with the all-state system, we kind of have like students that are playing Don Juan in their high school years or whatever in the orchestras. And uh, to a degree, it's good because you get to experience high level orchestra playing, but I've also thought about it a lot as pedagogically too, and it kind of feels like, at least in Texas, again, it's not a generalized United States thing, but I wonder if we're also teaching a lot of these kids just to play well to the test, and they're learning excerpts and etudes perfectly, and then they can't play anything without that, outside of that concept, you know?
That opens up a huge other topic
Yeah,
that
it sure does.
I don't know if you want to talk about that, but yeah, I mean it is an issue with all state in
Hmm.
general. I mean there are some people who play really well, and they probably by their level they should audition to all state because they can play in that orchestra, and it's also inspiring for some people to aspire to be in all state, and so they grow up on practicing those excerpts. But for a lot of other people it is actually detrimental and damaging because they're practicing excerpts that are too difficult for them
Right.
instead of working on something else. Yeah, and so yeah, then coming back to what is that scientific term you
The
said,
imposter syndrome.
imposter?
Yeah.
In fact, it might actually be detrimental after so much hard labor and hours of work. If they don't get accepted, sometimes it's counterproductive, I think.
Yeah.
But the short question to your imposter effect, I think the cure for that is to what I basically said. I think one has to be aware that there were bad experiences, but not let them to drag people down, and to just to learn from the experiences, know what the weaknesses are, and work practice to compensate or to make those weaknesses negligible.
Yeah, and there's a whole psychological study on this called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it's it's basically, summing it up, is people who estimate that they are going to be above average usually perform lower, right? And it's a
Form low.
statistical, yeah, and it's a
Mm.
statistical thing of just like, how do I put it? It's a lack of skill and the lack of ability to recognize that you lack the skill. And I think in music it's interesting because oftentimes in our field of performing, we go the other way of imposter syndrome, like thinking we're not good enough. That was a terrible performance, what have you. But uh, you and I are a sample size here too. We also, I mean, that I also have imposter, or have had imposter syndrome too, but we've also come from confidence. So it's an interesting parallel where um, people that have confidence can also be crippled as well, And I think that's something, as pedagogues or as teachers, we can think about how to nurture growth without instilling those things that you said leave traces within your life. Like in chamber music, how do you deal with people that are being condescending? Or how do you make sure that you don't end up in a situation where you're going to make a fool of yourself and make those people treat you like crap? Or things like that, right? Where there's training on the mental side as well, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
I wanted to say something about what you just said.
yeah.
So you actually were very helpful to me. I remember when you came one time when you studied in undergrad, you came to me to talk to me one time, and you said there are some very insecure people in our studio, and like you said something about that I should be gentle or more gentle with some people, just to think about. It was
Wording and everything,
actually a
right?
very good. It's that was a good moment because as a teacher, I've been developing from somebody who comes from really like a performance experience. And
Hmm.
when I came to teach, I was a performer.
Right.
I came fresh from playing those concerts with Young Artists International and winning a chamber music job, and I was a strong soloist and like a lot of interest. And so, to me, it was surprising that my students actually could not do certain things.
Right.
Um, and so I thought I had good teachers, and I also observed good teachers, and I observed what systematic work is and work on technique. But it took some time to realize that the same recipes don't work for everyone,
Hmm.
and it took even longer to realize um, how a different psychological approach needs to be taken to for different people. And most musicians are actually insecure, including the best ones.
Right.
Everyone has some insecurities, and so to work with each individual to make them feel comfortable or more secure, that's actually is an art. And I'm learning, and I think you were an inspiring push for me actually in that regard. I can say that I'm much better right now, by the way, at this than I used to be.
And the funny thing too is it's not like you and I ever had a disconnect because I actually do better under more blunt wording and things. But it was just something I noticed too because I remember, I mean, I'll keep it vague, but I remember a lot of people that were very broken, let's say, maybe is just a term, and or disappointed with how they felt in their musical life. And I was just like, have you tried talking with him? Right, that's kind of what I was thinking is just like maybe there's just a misunderstanding because it's probably a wording thing, right? So I thought about it as a undergrad who really just wanted to be a professor and performer like you. How do you teach? What are things you have to keep in mind? And I thought about it and was like, what it is he probably comes from, it's not a probably, he comes from a different style of teaching than what people in America have. But I want to segue into this too, because after studying with Elias and Attar, there was something that happened in one of Attar's lessons with, I was observing someone else's lesson, and he said, you know, back in my day, type of thing. And he said, I would be able to say this, but if I said it now, I'd get fired. And he said, that is, I understand, but also it's disappointing because I wonder how that affects the level of musicianship. And I want to ask you the same thing. Do you think because we are more aware of psychological damage, let's say, that we can have when we're kind of like harsh parenting as teachers, do you think that that's also making the level of musicianship oftentimes lower? Or do you think that there's maybe just a misunderstanding about it all?
I think it doesn't make level of musicianship lower. I think if I generalize, probably every student wants to hear an honest opinion of professor
Hmm.
about their playing. On the
Right.
other hand, probably most students are worried if they will hear an honest opinion about their playing that they might not like.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a job of a professor to know how to approach each student with her or his honest opinion and present it in a different way. Like for
Right.
example, my mom kept talking about her teacher in Novosibirsk Conservatory. His last name was Zinger,
Mm.
who was apparently a phenomenal pianist and phenomenal teacher. She would come very prepared and she would play, and then he would say, "Wonderful, that sounds really great." And then they would start working, and then by the end of the lesson there would be no stone on stone left because they would work on every note and like
Right.
this
It's
and
like
that, and then she would be
done.
wondering what was so wonderful at the beginning if
Right.
they worked on this, but she did not feel put down. I think that kind of approach, with her it worked. I mean, you wanted to hear honest opinion, but maybe if we work right now, if I know what I know right now, it would be a slightly different approach, for example, with you. Or if somebody else comes, like it depends also on the level. You were higher level. There are some people who are lower level, and if one comes and it sounds objectively not good, okay, if a student comes, but I can see that this person probably worked hard
Hmm.
on his or her assignment. So then to say, well, that sounds very out of tune, it immediately takes the wind out of somebody's sails, and then it's a discouragement.
Right.
Then it feels like, okay, there is no use to continue practicing. I understand this now. So the way to approach it is to actually, to encourage people to say, I see that you worked on it,
Hmm.
and it's improving. It's actually objectively improving. There are very few objective things in teaching, actually. Unfortunately, objective would be a scientific approach. Like the teaching is more or less subjective. Intonation is more or less objective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I've
it's
learned. Yeah.
but yeah, so people are insecure, and yes, the imposter syndrome may be there, but it also continues through professional lives, and people have to deal with it. And the job of a teacher is not only to teach people how to practice, which is one of the most important things for teachers, but also
Yeah.
to encourage students, kind of guide them on their own paths to deal with their insecurities, and to be able to overcome them. I think that's probably very important for teacher. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, how it was in the past. I mean, Kugel would say when I show up to him, he would say, he would refer to his professor Kramarov in Leningrad Conservatory, and he say, if I show up like this to Kramarov's lesson, he would just kick me out of the door.
Right.
And to me, it kind of stuck with me. I did kick my students out previously a few times. Like, you didn't practice, well, go practice, then why are you wasting my time?
Right.
Because it was done to me
Hmm.
mm, too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've learned, I think, better. I mean, but even with good professors and people in the past, things happened that were shocking. Like, there's a famous, very well-known story with Leopold Auer, who as a young student came to play for Vietnam. And Vietnam was very kind. Auer remembers that he was not overly polished, but he played. His Vietnam's wife was a pianist, and she was there also in a room, and so our played, and suddenly Vietan's wife stood up, and she started looking all over on the furniture everywhere, and so our stopped. Vietan also was very surprised. He stopped, and they were looking both, and he said eventually, like, what happened here? She said, well, there's some cats. I'm looking for cats that are meowing in such an annoying way, or something like that, to that effect. Our was so shocked that he fainted. He was in his teens at that time.
Yeah.
So, but apparently that was a learning experience for him. It didn't discourage him from continuing his education, but I don't know if that was necessary.
Right. Yeah. No, I do remember one of the times you said something about a cat meowing. So maybe that's where that came from.
Well, cat meowing is actually a very common comparison of string playing. We have to be careful, yeah. If
Yeah.
especially with glissandos down. I mean, if you're not careful,
Yeah.
it does sound like a meow.
It really does. Yeah. I always say for the student violas, the C string on the less good quality instrument sounds like a dying cow. So there's a lot of animalistic comparisons.
Yes, there are.
Well, I now it's funny because I didn't know that story about Auer, but uh maybe that's why, because he was notorious for like breaking some of his students' violins when he was disappointed in their practice, apparently.
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was breaking
I
students' violence.
I could be wrong, but I, I think that was a story that Heifetz told or something. So I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So a nice lineage of your teachers can have an effect on your pedagogy as well. And it's something to keep in mind. It's like parenting, right? Like you oftentimes can become like your parents if you're in a unfortunate situation of like abuse or mental distress, honestly, from your family. You can end up being like that onto your kids as well, as much as you hated it growing up.
Yes.
Um, it's important to recognize for sure. Um, and I'm curious now, so this is something that's something that lasted a lot on me too, was your switch to gut strings in your choice of viola. So do you want to talk a little bit about your how you found your viola, the history of your viola, and
Told you my story about funding my viola or no?
you did
I
a little
did.
bit, yeah, but I'm curious about, just connecting why you stuck with, or you could even talk about your instrument with before as well, but um yeah, your choice for gut strings, your choice of sound, and what drew you to that.
Well, the instrument is probably separate from the choice of gut strings because
Right.
I was always proud of having a very loud, big sound.
Hmm.
But at some point, I was thinking that I would like a more sophisticated sound. And my parents heard that in Israel, in Haifa, there was one collector of instruments and art that has supposedly a Carcassi viola that he was willing to sell for very cheap. And so when I came to Israel, my parents took me to Haifa, which was quite a drive from Jerusalem. And so we came and we looked at that Carcassi that he prepared. He put it, it was a small viola. And since I was looking for myself and not as a business transaction, it became immediately apparent that I do not want this instrument as my instrument. Of course, if I was a smarter businessman, I would probably have purchased that one because carcasses apparently are very expensive if it's a real one.
Right.
Uh, but I didn't care about making a business. I just said, okay, what else do you have? And he said, well, I have this big French viola. And so he pulls out from under his bed, which under his bed there were several instruments just stuck together, very dusty. He pulls out the case and the dust just flies all over. And he opens the case, and here's that viola with a beautiful but broken tailpiece and no bridge and a couple of strings hanging, and I in horrible condition. And I said, "How am I supposed to try it? Do you have another viola? Maybe we can put bridge from another viola on this one." And I brought some old strings with me, so we put bridge from a big viola, and the bridge was horrible. Actually, it just was a piece of wooden legs, and the bridge was too big for that viola, and we put violin tailpiece, which was too small, and I put
Hmm.
all strings on like old strings on that viola,
Right.
and I start playing, and I'm hearing it speaking to me. And my parents also, like as I said, they are both musicians, and they said this instrument has a nice voice. There is something in it, and so I just that collector never sold anything ever. And he would not let out of his apartment, he would not let any instrument or art for verification. Like if you
Hmm.
wanted to buy something, you can buy it right there. But if you want to check or look at it somewhere, no. And so
Right.
I just bought it right there. I took a risk. I bought that instrument right there and just brought it to United States and went to Amati violin shop. They didn't do much with it. It was not cracked or anything. They maybe glued some seams somewhere. They put new bridge, new tailpiece, new sound post, and fingerboard, and just those surfacey things that are important. And the instrument started sounding tremendously better right away. And then just started playing on it and just kept opening up and opening up. It's like a flower.
Yeah.
Uh, just keeps opening up. So I got lucky with that instrument, thanks to my parents and thanks to the circumstances. It's a French instrument that has a label Mansuya Paris, but it's not Mansuya Paris probably, but I really don't care because it
Right.
just sounds so good. Yeah, and with the gut strings, I used to play first because I wanted a loud sound. I played on things like Damastic Spirecore, um,
And Peter Enfield and stuff like that.
strong ones. The
Yeah.
metal they last a long. So, but again, because I wanted more sophisticated sound, I switched to Peter Enfield. That sounded really better comparing to what, at least warmer comparing to what I had. I also played on Dominance before,
Hmm.
but anyway, played on those for a couple years, or maybe 3 years, and then I just thought sounds metallic a little bit and wanted to try something warmer, and then pandemic started, and I
Yep.
ordered olives. And those are got core strings. And I practiced on. I thought it sounds wonderful. I just spent too much time tuning, lots of time tuning. But it sounded really, really beautiful. Those strings are really good. Apparently, they used to be what domestic dominance became later.
Right.
That everybody played on olives
Hmm.
until the synthetics came along. And and then I started researching more because olives were gut core, and I started researching more. And I contacted Demian Lugolecki, and he sent me gut strings that were pure gut. And when I put them on my viola, I just thought I never heard my instrument sounding like that. Like, why did I not play on those strings before? And that's it. And ever since then, I'm playing on gut strings. Unfortunately, Lugolecki is no longer producing strings, and I also found a really good CNG string from France. Eliakim Boussoir
Hmm.
makes really great strings, CNG. They are gut wrapped in silver or other metal. And so, yeah, that's a short, I guess, story, shortish answer to your question.
Yeah, and I'm curious too, because I don't know if you remember, but before my master's auditions, I was inspired and I chose to play on gut core strings. I think with 2 or 3 weeks notice, which anyone who's listening, please don't do that. Um, because
Brave of you.
it was dumb of me,
Yes.
but especially playing Bartok. Um, but I also connected with the sound, like the sophisticated sound of it. What would you say in terms of viola sound? Because I think we're very intertwined on this, but as you know, I just recently purchased an instrument that's very contrary.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. But it's very contrary. It's a very resonant instrument. It's very bold and brilliant compared to what I had, which was more similar to what you currently play on. And as someone who I think is delving more into, you know, Baroque music or French Romantic, that's not necessarily like it's not like you're going and playing Kugel arrangements right now, you know, something that's less virtuosic in that capacity. Um, do you think that there's something to say about the modern viola sound that's kind of morphing away from what it was originally intended for? What are your thoughts on that?
You mean the tendency, the viola tendencies right now, in the viola music,
Yeah.
the sound,
Or even just players too.
I think people are looking for different niche.
Hmm.
There is such a the level of playing in general is so good right now, so strong, so high uh, of players that to really stand out, people are looking for something totally different. And so, in I think relatively recent years, there is a new wave of performers, mostly composers, performers, or performers, composers,
Hmm.
came out that exploring totally different sonorities from viola, scadratura, playing with bow sticks on the strings, playing sideways instead of across the strings, behind the bridge, pizzicato, all sorts of effects.
Right.
And usually, when it's done very well, when people come to such concerts, uh, they are often at awe, like they are astonished by what a viola can do. And leaving a concert like that, you hear, oh, oh my God, that was so good, or it was so great, I wanted to cry. Like those are the expressions I heard, and this is to answer your question, viola sound. This is exploring what viola can do. I don't know if it is in the nature of viola particularly, and the downside of compositions or performances like this is that it is pretty minimalistic in terms of musical ideas. Like each piece would be circling around on the same harmonic progressions, not very I don't want to say not very imaginative harmonic progression, but it's not very developed harmonic
Yeah.
progressions, and also melodic development or melody as such is not usually a big part of that of such performance. So, in terms of that, I think that yes, people are looking for a niche, and it is incredibly astonishing when one sees the fluidity of and freedom and communication and the show aspect of those performers that are really truly wonderful at what they do. I personally don't know if I will come back again to the same concert because like intellectually I am astonished, but in terms of emotional benefit, it doesn't do very much to me.
Sure.
I'm not saying to other people maybe it does,
Yeah.
um, but I think the way to look for something different is to maybe look for different from like we said several times, sophisticated, the word sophisticated, I was the first one who said it. I
Right.
think that's what actually will distinguish one really good player from another really good player, because the playing right now, because it's so good and people are drilling accepts so much, a lot of people, as a consequence, I don't know, there are probably several factors, but as a consequence, a lot of really good violas sound very similar to each other. The sounds are very similar, which probably was always a case with violin players, but the elite players, they don't sound the same.
Right.
The players that are better, they sound special. You almost can immediately recognize who is who because their sounds have personalities. And I think that's what would be a way for players to go to break through, I guess, through to break from the average really strong level to go to something higher is just to hear how every note sounds. Like, and to see if they can do something else with what they're playing. Does that
Yeah,
answer your
no,
question?
it absolutely does because it's something I've noticed that carries through a lot in competition. And I was thinking about it a lot as I've had a lot of colleagues here that study with, I mean, IU Jacobs pumps out a lot of orchestral players, as everyone knows. And there's fantastic musicians here that do not misunderstand me when I say that. I am not complaining or anything, but I've heard faculty say, well, have you considered switching to viola? You'll get a job easier, or you'll have a career. And used to, I think that was the case. But in today's day, when I hear a professor say that, I want to go up and just be like, let's see you do it. Because I think that the viola competition or the viola scene now is very, very, very competitive. Um, and that's diminishing on violists, um, both artistically and technically, which intertwine anyways. But I kind of wonder what's going to make that change, or if that's just kind of a lasting effect of how viola was. But I've noticed in competitions recently, like um, there's a level of perfection that is great. Like all of these violists are so talented, but to a degree, some like I'm not talking people that have won or anything, but when you watch the broad competition or broad performance or anything, oftentimes the sound, like you were saying, can kind of blend together. And like a violist that I know you and I both agree on is fantastic and very unique is Timothy Rithout. He has a very unique sound that I think just stands out. Tobias Zimmerman is another, Atara Rod is another. And I kind of wonder, I mean, violists know, but not everyone knows when you buy a viola, there's a distinct sound for each instrument of a viola that I think when you go and search violins, yeah, they have different sounds, but you can kind of direct them a little bit more. But for viola, like I can't play like how I can play on my viola on your viola, and vice versa. And I wonder if like certain people almost like I know Matthew Lippman uses two different violas for the type of sound that he wants. That sort of thing. And Elias switched from a very bright and bold viola to a viola with more sophisticated sound as well, more depth. And I'm curious on your opinion. Like, do you think that the instrument almost tunnels us into one type of sound and we can't um have both, if that makes sense? You know, are we going from clarity and resonance or sophistication, or is there an intertwine that we just haven't found yet with our new repertoire and everything?
I think when you are looking for an instrument, you're probably looking for a certain sound,
Right.
right? And you also have certain sound in your ear that, and certain range of colors that you want to be able to produce on your instrument. And often you actually can work and achieve majority of your colors on pretty much any instrument. It's
Hmm.
just better instruments will give you easier time and also a broader range of possibilities. So if you, for example, so I don't think there is such thing as like this one is bright instrument, but it doesn't have a warm color.
Hmm.
One probably can make it warmer with vibrato, different approach to both speeds and hair.
Right.
Just one has to work, I guess, harder to produce certain colors on a bright instrument.
Hmm.
If its instrument is bright, but on the other hand, a very warm, sophisticated instrument might not have the same bright resonant qualities. So it just depends. I don't think instrument will dictate what you wanna do. I think you dictate to your instrument, or not dictate. Actually, instrument is a very capricious thing. I think you will work with your instrument. Or I don't mean you personally,
Right.
Jacob. I mean one,
Broad
anyone.
sense, yeah.
One will work with her instrument to produce whatever colors one wants to produce,
Right.
unless they're just impossible on that instrument for whatever reason.
Right. I guess it's more about finding an instrument that you can work with rather than an instrument that just,
That's what I think.
yeah. And that's what I found too. I talked with William Harris Lee when I was searching because I mean, working with Atar, that's a connection with William Harris Lee, and they were willing to work out a deal with me too. So I needed to purchase an instrument through them. Uh, but he was saying, because I asked him like, what older instruments do you have? I think I resonate more with that type of sound. And he showed me some, and I reached back out to him a little disappointed and was like, "Why is this instrument $20,000? It does not sound that good." And he said, "Think about it this way: violas back in the 1700s didn't play Bartok or Hindemith, and the sound profile was different. Like it has a unique sound, but it's not going to be as loud, or it's not going to be as clear." And now makers like what is his name? Not Douglas Cox, but the other famous modern maker, starts with a K, I believe. Anyways, one of those makers makes instruments that just can kind of do everything, but still have that resonance and all of that. And uh, Manfio is another one that I know makes like smaller instruments for violas to navigate on more, and those are quite popular throughout the country or throughout the world. So I think it's something that's developing now, and that's why viola sound is becoming more unified, is because people are finding uh I don't know, they're finding a different sound within the new modern violas, and I'm wondering if that's almost going to make it easier to accomplish what you were talking about of finding a niche. You know what I mean?
It's, well, people are looking for a niche because in a way it's easier also. It's not
Right.
only, no, it is,
Yeah.
it's not only the sound of viola that, or per se of an instrument,
Uh-huh.
uh, which I just want to say that older instruments, sometimes they sound softer in a small room, but they sound much bigger in the whole. It's
Hmm.
actually very interesting. Like, for example, my viola that is much smaller than TCU viola that we have by Cole. That
Hmm.
is a very, very, very good instrument. I think it's 17-inch viola,
Yeah.
actually, and it sounds huge. Actually, it has huge sound. But I compared before doing my Telemann concert. I actually compared. I recorded myself on both violas in the hall because there was no comparison in my house. Like my family, like and everybody just said, "Well, Uncle viola just sounds so much bigger and fuller and deeper." But in the whole, my viola was as deep and as full and as loud and much more focused than Hancock's viola. That was very interesting
Yeah.
because that viola was not loud. So those 17th century violas, maybe they were not made to play Bartok concerto, but they are capable of
Yeah.
playing Bartok concertos. But the issue is not only the viola, the issue is not only the sound that one has to look for sound. One has to, like, sound is just a tool. Like,
Right.
one has to sing through, but one needs to want to do something with the music that goes beyond just doing all the dynamics and playing all the notes. And that's what's difficult. That's where actually study of Telemann, Bach, Mozart, Shostakovich, I would say, comes as very important because it's that's why people have difficulty with studying Baroque music and Mozart playing. It's too clear. It's too uh, obvious when something is not going well, and it requires a lot more hours to achieve a much higher level. It requires a lot more thinking, more creativity, more study, and I think that kind of work on Bach, Telemann, Mozart, and Shostakovich is lacking most of the time. People just get to playing the right notes, the right time, uh,
Right.
in tune, and that's where it stopped. That's why some people just feel like, okay, some people don't like playing Bach. Okay, actually, tests are different. Some people don't like playing Bach. It's okay, but it's just for studies. I think getting Bach or Telemann or Mozart to an extraordinary high level raises the overall level of people tremendously higher. And that's what I think one of key elements is, like working on something hard, spending hours thinking, listening, imagining, to bring your level that much higher, just even a little bit higher than average
Right.
on this, which will help with the sound, and then viola will not be an issue, I think. Bright
Yeah.
or not bright, yeah.
No, I appreciate you saying that because it's something that I've tossed around in my head a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other people have too. Is it's like, I mean, it goes back and circles back to maybe the imposter syndrome thing of like blaming the instrument too. But yeah,
Yeah.
I want to touch on the your point about the importance of studying Bach, Mozart, Telemann, and you mentioned Shostakovich too. What because as a student, when I was learning anything classical or Baroque, we especially classical though. I mean, if we are talking like Mozart or Stamitz or Hofmeister for the viola realm, we're told intonation is very even more vulnerable. Um, we have pulse, not just playing steadily, but pulse more specifically. Um, and then there's kind of this vague concept now that I've heard differing opinions on, but like um almost thinking of it as pretty binary of we have the 16th notes of digga 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 dum, or we have the lyrical side of something too. Um and that kind of creates this really polished picture. But I've also heard the contrary of if we make it sound too perfect, digga 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 da, then it's boring. And there still needs to be this line. So when a student is approaching, let's say Hofmeister or Stamitz, what direction, let's say it's polished, they know all the notes and everything, what is the next steps for them to tackle classical style and develop from it?
There should be direction.
Yeah.
I think that was on my mind when you were talking about 16 notes. I think
Right.
in that style, the direction of the 16 notes is very important, and overall the phrasing. It is still the style. Actually, almost any style of music has an underlining singing element
Hmm.
of our viola or violin. I mean, we are pretty lucky because we are playing on such a beautiful instrument with beautiful sound, and this idea of singing um, on viola, on violin actually, but also on viola goes back to Tartini, who really insisted on singing. He was saying if you cannot sing, you cannot play.
Hmm.
But he meant sing on violin, not like physically sing. Like if one cannot sing on violin, then one cannot play. I think that singing quality, even in fast notes, in classical music, like even Hofmeister and Stamitz, this is very important.
Yeah.
And to achieve that is actually very difficult. But if one is trying to do that as a singing character, then it's much better. And then comes also, like, if you're going, you said going beyond the right notes, intonation,
Right.
and
Right.
of
Right.
this.
Right.
And then there are little details, which note can be emphasized or prolonged more, what, um, which note you can extend a little, the little shades of dynamics. Not making things sound similar. If the phrase repeats, how does it sound different? All those little things will improve one's classical performance style, I think.
Yeah. I think it's something because I'm working with a student on Hofmeister right now. And it's funny because I see a lot of what my tendencies were when I was learning Stamets in her playing, in their playing. And it's like as a teacher, I'm struggling not to be like, okay, let's just play it metrically because I'm not hearing the right notes. I'm not hearing the right, we're rushing during this, we're doing that. But you know, getting them to understand the classical genre. And especially, I mean, now I'm sounding like a doctoral student because I'm getting all nerdy about music theory, but especially without like they don't have musical theory knowledge. So how can we explain harmonic tendencies of, oh, this is the dominant pulling here. We need to emphasize that more than the tonic, or hey, there's a really cool inflection here that, you know, I think that's probably something that's more interesting. So let's bring that down so that can be more prominent. Or don't take time for anything except for this special moment, because if we take time here, it's going to just sound like pre-planned, that sort of type of thing. But when there's not an understanding of music theory, music history in younger playing, I think we can build, as you know, we talked about this when I was studying Bach with you. Um, I think we start to build bad habits because we started learning things without understanding the background or the why for a lot of it. And I'm curious, I mean, this goes back to our talk on education, right? Uh, when you're dealing with a student that doesn't have that because they grew up in America and they didn't get music theory knowledge or piano or music history at a young age, do you have a system for navigating teaching classical or Baroque for that matter?
I started what you just mentioned about dominant and how it resolves and how important the harmonic structure. I'm doing this more and more with students who don't have this kind of background
Hmm.
to explain to them. Again, you're asking about classical, right? There was
Yeah,
something I was going to say just now, and I forgot.
it'll come back.
It will come back. What was the question again?
Just how do you, as a teacher, let's say, or as a
Oh,
pedagogue, how do you?
I remember what I wanted to say. I think it's the important thing is to start from accessible repertoire. Like for
Hmm.
example, if one is not ready for stamets, then there are some simpler, smaller classical pieces that one can play.
Hmm.
Uh, that are a lot in viola repertoire. It doesn't have to be a concerto, could be a few shorter classical pieces, and even small excerpts or movements from some sonatas by
Right.
the same Stamets, or a duet, maybe a movement of a duet with a teacher that
Hmm.
works really well. And also a very good example of classical sonatas that can bring the level up is Bruni sonatas for two violas. It's actually for viola in cello or for viola in accompanying viola.
Mm.
There are six of those, and they are written by progressive difficulty, and that's a wonderful introduction to a classical style. Plus, playing with a teacher again comes back to the same. One has to try to play with a beautiful sound. And the same applies to Bach or Baroque pieces. Like if one is not ready necessarily to play a sophisticated suite or partita by Bach, maybe just one movement from Bach's suite that is more simple, like a small saraband movement, could be
Hmm.
good. Or looking at some other Baroque pieces. Telemann is not easy
Right.
also, but it is
Yeah.
simpler. Sorry, I didn't mean simpler. It is shorter. It
Yeah.
is more concise. Like, for example, Telemann Gamba Fantasies, they're shorter. Each one is on average 5-6 minutes, while Bach suite can last 30 minutes with all the repeats.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to start with something more accessible. But again, one has to be careful and look at the level of each student. But it's fun, I think, to explore some smaller pieces. It doesn't have to be always Hofmeister Stamets right at the beginning.
Yeah. I agree because I studied with you. So I know you enjoy finding what was it that people called it shoebox or was it shoebox repertoire, the pieces you had that were
Well, actually, it was not a shoebox. People were calling it, but actually, what happened is I saw on auction, like one auction, there was an advertisement of like a lot of some music and books. And they
Mhm.
just showed one picture. There was like on this picture, there were some random items, and there was, I think, one viola, something, there were some violin music. But what I was more interested is in the books. There was a book by Sazai, violin harmonique, and I never heard of Sazai, and I looked it up, and he was a violin professor in Paris Conservatory with a huge background. I don't want to go into this, but it was very interesting. So I wanted that one, and there was Spohr's autobiography on this also on this photo. And I thought it wouldn't hurt to get a viola piece. And so I bid on it and I got it for very cheap.
Mhm.
And so when I came to collect it, they brought out a huge box. I did not expect it was a huge box of music that had viola music, chamber music. I was astonished.
Mhm.
But the books were not there.
Uh,
And I said, where are the books? You guys did not include those books. I wanted those books. So they said, oh, we will search for it. And so, and meanwhile, I was excited. And that's when I found out about Joseph Jongen, for example, viola compositions and other pieces that I never knew about, but they are really wonderful.
mhm.
And then I got a call. I don't remember exactly how they found the books, and I came to collect the books. And they brought another huge box. And I said, this is not mine. They said, oh, yes, this is yours. And so apparently, those were two huge boxes in the same lot. They just misplaced one of those. And so the books were, if not for those books, probably the auction would probably have kind of misplaced that box. But luckily, the books were not in the first box. And so that's how they were searching for it. And total were more than 100, I think 110 or 120 books and music, chamber music scores, all of this. And that's the shoebox.
Right. So I was
That
misinformed by my previous colleagues in your
yeah.
studio.
Well, that was, I think it came from one of my colleagues, that term
Ah,
shoebox. Yeah, but yeah, that's how I discovered it. That music actually belonged um, to Armand Pushman, who was not a professional violist, but he was amateur violist, and he was brother of famous painter, artist José Pushman.
hmm.
And Armand Pushman actually studied with Maurice Viau in
Oh,
Paris Conservatory. And his music comes from that time, and he also liked playing chamber music, so there were chamber music. So several of his pieces, I actually had suspicion that several of those music pieces had Vios marking on it, because there were some like a teacher marking with
right.
suggestions and things like this. It was fascinating.
Yeah, that could be a whole book in of itself, I'm sure. Just breaking down that. But was that what inspired the first album you recorded?
Yes,
So
yes, because that, yeah.
do you want to talk a little bit about that and why you chose the certain pieces you did?
Well, I mean, all of those pieces, actually not all of them, but most of those pieces were in that box, in that collection. Like
Right.
there was a Kunk Rhapsody, for example, that was interesting. I never heard of Pierre Kunk. Engelbrecht, well, he was actually quite known, but I never heard of him either. There was one or two pieces, but it led to research. Also, there was Chasson piece.
Hmm.
I think it's known, but I didn't know that. one before, but it's pretty well known. It's piece for either cello or viola.
Hmm.
And so I just started looking. I found that Kung had a sonata, and the only copy was available at the Provo library in like Primrose Archives. So
Right.
they actually sent it to me. I can't believe it, but they sent me the physical copy. I made a copy of that, and that's a piece for viola with piano or orchestra. But Kung apparently never got to orchestrating that piece, even though in the score sometimes you can see more like what he meant, like
Hmm.
and so that sonata plus Rhapsody and Hilgenbrecht. I started researching. I found two more pieces in addition to the one that was in a box, and that's how the album came to be. I was very lucky that my colleague John Owings, pianist, he is a fantastic pianist and musician, and he was very willing to work on those pieces, and we played several concerts with this repertoire, and we recorded. That was a lot of work for both of us, and yeah, I'm very very lucky that he wanted to do it, and doing it with a lesser pianist would not have been the same. I mean,
Right.
he really is a tremendous musician. So yeah, and that's how it came to be.
Yeah. I mean, and it's something too to think about, like, uh, finding the right people to work with, because with music, especially, and I mean, realistically, anytime, even as a soloist, you have to work with other people who's gonna like you have to facilitate the concert venue and everything at the very least. Like there's always going to be a collaborative aspect to it. But you've worked with John Owings, but also you had your trio, and things like that. And you found the people that wanted to find different pieces to play, wanted to have this unique um sound. And maybe it's worth talking about a little bit of like how you found out that John wanted to collaborate with you on this album, and how you found your trio, and how the origins of that were, like how those developed.
But the trio, I actually, when I came to TCU, first year, I approached my clarinet colleague, Gary Whitman, and John Owings, and I said, let's do a recital of trio music. And there are three very well-known pieces for this trio. There is Mozart, which is supposedly the first one,
Hmm.
written for this combination, Kegelstadt Trio, and there is Schumann, and there are Bruch pieces. And so we did a concert of those three pieces. We didn't do the whole Bruch set, but we did some.
Hmm.
And we just liked working together, and it was fun, and we just started exploring what else is written for this combination. So we just kind of continued, and then the composer started writing for us pretty soon, actually, after we started playing together. And so that continued. We did record an album of new pieces that were written for us by Eric Evazen and Yelena Sokolovsky from Israel, a fantastic composer, Yelena Sokolovsky. And that was a unique piece for viola. Well, she called it a Venice suite. It was a concerto grosso for three musicians and nine instruments, I think, or something like this.
Hmm. Interesting.
Um, I played viola and baseball xylophone, I think it was. Yeah, I had to play like to sustain that note with a baseball. And John Owings played on grand piano and harpsichord and clavecin and no clavecin, not clavecin, celeste.
Mm.
Harpsichord and clavecin is the same. And Gary played on three different clarinets. So we had quite a complicated setup on stage when we premiered it and when we recorded.
Hmm.
It was fun. And that lasted until Gary Whitman retired.
Right.
And John Owings also retired by now. So actually, it's not easy to find a piano collaborator
Yeah.
after he retired. So I haven't been successful yet in finding a pianist I would like to play and rehearse as in detail as with John.
Right. It's
So
a
it
hard
is
thing.
important.
Hard thing sometimes. But I want to say, you said you were not very good at networking, but I think this shows something because I mean, it maybe shows your humble side. You reached out and you found people to work with that seemed interesting to you, and something that's always stuck with me. I mean, realize it or not, but you were the one who showed me like it's not all about the music. It's how you approach people. One of the first things my parents said when they met you and my grandparents was, "Wow, he's very approachable and nice and humble, and he had nothing but good things to say, and he didn't seem like, you know, he didn't seem like a typical European musician where you think they're very uppity and like, like
Mhm.
that's what they said.
And
Like,
snobby, uh-huh.
right, they didn't. They said, "Oh, there's no snobbiness that was there." And that was something that I think resonated of you have to be a good person too.
That
Um,
actually is very important. This is one of the things I think that students need to realize, in addition to everything everyone is doing, is like it's really important to be a good person to
yeah.
make a good career. Yeah.
And and as I say, and I talked with Atar about this too, he was reading my research and he asked why I chose depression as a segue with music. And he was like, "Are you depressed?" I said, "Yes, I'm very much so." Like, I mean, I'll say it on the air because it's real, right? Um, and he was so shocked. He said, "How? You don't seem like someone who'd be so depressed. You're so personable, charismatic." And I said, "I force myself to be personable because it's what I wish people would do for me," and explain this all to him. And we talked about it, and I said, "I wish more musicians would be people rather than so formulaic and, for lack of a better word, they can be fake, right?" And I said, something that I've noticed is a lot of musicians can be a certain way to grow in their field. So they utilize um, good relationships to network and only to network, which is never what I mean when I say, oh, yeah, be personable because you can grow from it. But I think it's something that people need to realize of people can read authenticity. People can tell when you're not being genuine. And to those who are encountering people that are not being genuine, maybe it's something to consider. Maybe don't play their game, and you know you don't feel pressured to buy into somebody who's not being genuine just because they have stature or something like that. But yeah, I wanted to say like you were an inspiration of it's not just about artistry, it's also offstage too. Because I've in my recent years of studying, I've had people tell me it's not about the audience, it's about you. And this is not from Atar, just to be clear. This is from other people. Um, of it's also not from Elias, but it's from other people outside of that sphere where they come from a different background to me, and they couldn't care less about feelings. And it's stuck of like, is that what it takes to be one of those famous musicians? But it's not. And if it is, why would I want to be a part of that? Is what I've had to realize. I
Yeah,
I care
that's
more
true.
about other
Yeah.
things.
So one of the well, thank you so much for saying what you said. I'm glad that you thought it was inspiring about. But I think one of the things, fake or not fake, I think one of the things that one has to work on is to be genuinely interested in other people.
Yeah.
Uh, that's just you have to learn to be genuine. If it's not your second nature, You have to develop it. And I think then the networking will happen because you will be genuinely interested about hearing what other people have to say.
Hmm.
And that kind of goes along, or maybe it's a separate, slightly thing about being a good person. I mean, being a good person, it means you don't talk badly about your colleagues or, your peers, and you just try to be nice, respectful to other people, as much as your ego is uh, nurtured inside.
Right.
Which, by the way, is also, this is another thing, if one is only ambitious and nurturing ego, then it's not going to lead to good results because the ego is it's good, it's healthy to certain extent, I guess. But if you only want to outperform, that's what the ego is like. You want to outperform other people. If you only want to outperform other people, that actually not gonna lead you to a very good, necessarily musical place.
Right.
So it has to be combined with some healthy um, goal setting, like in your own play, for
I think
example.
I think it has something to do with security. A lot of people feel insecure, and that's why they have to search for the external validation, or like what you were saying, that they lack being able to care about other people or have genuine interest in other people, probably because they're not as secure with who they are, right?
But this
And
is also a problem with modern society actually and
yeah.
tendency, like all the social media
Hmm.
and thing. Because yeah, people just on social media, the trend is you post about yourself all the time. All right, so the know thyself becomes all self-absorbing
Hmm. No, I agree.
journey, I guess. And
Yeah.
then again, that goes along with the advice you received, I think, recently, that just you are important, audience is not important. Well, this is kind of I think that leads nowhere, and that's a lot of people. They just want to feel. I see it among students too. Like they want to see very comfortable. Like they have to be comfortable. Like they
Hmm.
have to be comfortable with themselves. It's my performance. I have to be comfortable with my own feelings. Um, it's a trap because yes, one has to be comfortable, and I don't have all the recipes, but one has to be comfortable. But on the other hand, when one comes out on stage, one plays actually for the audience, and the audience wants to get something from a performance other than just seeing somebody being comfortable on stage. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's a problem. How does one get from personal comfort to actually discomfort, or going outside the boundaries so that the audience is not bored and that person is not bored?
Yeah. I
One
mean, I
of the things.
remember, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I remember something that Mr. Newman said about Dr. Adkins. He was talking to me, but he said, you know, Elizabeth never gets nervous on stage. I always get nervous. And I started to wonder if that was a bad thing that I got nervous, but no, nerves mean I care. And I thought that was interesting. It was like, first of all, the dynamic between the two of them is hilarious and I love them. But it redefined what nerves were to me. It wasn't an inability to achieve something. It was meaning that I freaking care about what's about to happen. I am vulnerable. And I think being vulnerable on stage as a musician is why people come to see you. They're not trying to judge you necessarily. They're trying to learn about you, or at least that's how it should be.
Hopefully, they are actually trying to. They're coming because they like the piece and like your playing
Yeah.
or something, and they want
Right.
to enjoy because they know how you're gonna play or
Hmm.
like what you're capable of, and they come to enjoy an evening of nice music.
Right.
Yeah, I don't believe that Elizabeth doesn't get nervous.
Right.
I
I
think
don't either.
everyone get nervous. Yeah, I think she does.
Yeah. I mean, she's a fantastic player, and
Yeah,
it seems like people who get nervous uh the most care the most. I remember like any of the my colleagues in studios or um yeah, mainly my colleagues in studios, whenever they got really nervous, they always were like they broke down, but then they talked about things and it was just like, wow, maybe they're more passionate than I am. You know, like that sort of aspect has always intrigued me. Um, because I never
yeah.
used to struggle with nerves and now I do.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Like to,
Yeah, to a pretty bad extent. And I realized during because I did a ton of auditions this past year and traveled a lot and was sleep deprived and did not take care of myself very well. But throughout that journey, I realized um the more that I was tired and weak, the better I did. And it was a very unhealthy discovery. I remember my Peabody audition was, I think, probably my strongest audition outside of IU. And I had 3 hours of sleep and did not eat that morning and had just driven 8 hours in a snowstorm. So it was a very rough few hours. And uh, I played so well. And what stuck in my brain was is like whenever people who are overthinkers do don't even have the chance to overthink and let their body take control, if that makes sense, or let their mind take control of their body, the better they can do. And that just kind of made me start to focus on, okay, how do I create systems of like flow state essentially, right? How do I walk in and say, I'm secure, I know that I have what it takes, and not let nerves get in the way, but be nervous in a different way, right?
both auditions and performances, like in chamber music and also solo recitals, that you get really nervous?
It depends because I think I've done like 4 or 5 chamber recitals this semester. It's been busy, but it's been
Very
really
good.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I have a quartet that we're going to compete with, so it's been a really fun journey. Um, Only one time was I explicitly nervous. Um, but I haven't had a bow shake outside of just like auditions. I remember the only time I've had my bow shake was auditioning for Yura Lee because she is so fantastic. I got really in my head and was like, I don't know how to play anymore.
Oh, that was for the school
Yeah, it
audition?
was for the school.
Mhm.
But for the chamber recitals, no, I never have nerves and physique. But what I've noticed is when I'm uncomfortable working with the people that I'm working with, my jaw is really clenched. And I'm more rigid because in chamber music at least, it's a lack of trust with the other people, which makes me feel like I need to be even more locked into the performance. And then I end up becoming more closed off. Um, but on the contrary, when I'm working with people that I really mesh well with in chamber music, it's my best music ever. Even better than solo playing, because I feel alive and everything's flowing. I have good musical trust and collaboration, you know. So it is an interesting thing how environment can dictate a lot.
But that's how I think it's natural, how it's supposed to be. If you play
Yeah.
with people you like and there is a lot of trust, yeah. But if you
Mhm.
get nervous because you're playing a recital, I think maybe you're focusing on again, like, this is, I can do it. Maybe excessive focus on I can do it rather than, okay, let me play this beautiful music for those people so they enjoy it as much as I am.
Right. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but remember when I came back for the viola day in October, I told you, oh, I'll play this contemporary piece and then I'll play Paganini. And I didn't understand why I chose to do Paganini outside of, I had been working on the piece for a while or whatever. But especially since I was going to be playing on Barbara Sedwick's viola and didn't have an adjustment, it seemed even more stupid of me to do that. And before I walked on stage, I started thinking, I said, I think the reason I wanted to play Paganini was to prove something. And I said, I'm not going to do that. So I decided to talk and I said a little bit about why I chose the repertoire, but I felt so much better that I chose not to play Paganini, not because I wasn't comfortable playing it on a foreign instrument, but also because it showed a level of security of I have nothing to prove. I don't care. I'm gonna play this music because it's a cool piece and it deserves to be known more. Um, and that's something that has taken a lot of time to find of just being like, if I have to prove myself to people, then maybe I don't want to be around them too much, sort of thing.
It sounds to me like you wanted a challenge,
Yeah.
and you wanted to do something showy and showcase yourself, but right there and then you probably realized that you have a completely different instrument in your hands, and you really don't need to showcase yourself.
Yeah.
You didn't feel I think you didn't feel 100 probably percent comfortable with that instrument to play, and you also did not feel you had to prove anything by going through and doing this piece, and so you made a very wise and mature decision. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
that's
I
great.
was talking with Noah before. Um, it was a very, coming back to TCU the two times most recently have had separate challenges. As I've realized, I won't go into it, but I realized that the environment was inspiring of a lot of growth in positive ways, but also crafted someone who was very insecure, um, due to a plethora of different things. Um, and then coming back for the viola day thing, I that was like my nail of like, no, I'm not proving myself to anybody here. Even though those people that made me feel insecure were not present, TCU itself, the school itself, as you were saying, like the traces of unhealthiness could still impact me, like being on that stage, right? So it was definitely like a reclamation of let's put an end to this insecurity type of thing. So it was fun. It was good.
I'm glad you could come. It was really
Yeah,
good, and you played really well.
I'm glad I
And
could come too. It was fun.
yeah,
I'm curious. I know we're reaching the end of time here, and we've talked a bit, but in terms of um, there's one big thing I wanted to talk about with your repertoire choices and how you view musicality. Um, when when you're finding yourself as a musician, um, what are some of the things you think about for developing, like for you, let's say, or when you're teaching a student? What are some of the thought processes you use to determine authenticity or finding your niche, as you put it? Does that kind of make sense?
very difficult. The most difficult question
Yeah,
for the for the last
yeah.
or
Saved it for
whatever. To,
best for last, right?
well, so authentic, right? So that means true to oneself, or it can also mean true to the piece,
Hmm.
like or true to the style. Like it has several meanings, right?
Right.
So with I recently, by recently I mean last few years, with students, I don't insist on my interpretation of a piece. Like I let my students play a piece the way they play, even Bach or even Telemann. I let them do what they want to do with it, and I only correct them when it goes beyond um, as authentic style, let's say, which are very few things. Like if one plays Telemann with a lot of vibrato and lots of meowing, that's not appropriate for Telemann.
Hmm.
And if one plays Brahms, for example, very rigidly, like one plays Bach, without direction on fast notes, that is not appropriate for Brahms, for example. But
Right.
other than that, I try to let them play the way they want to play, and I only talk to them about what we talked before, like about music, musical directions. I ask them questions. I ask them what they want to do, and sometimes it's an instinct, and sometimes the instincts can be really good, and that's fine. And
Hmm.
sometimes they have a logical explanation. But if something doesn't sound right, and they don't have instinct about this, and it's just by accident, then I just point out that this is not not appropriate or doesn't sound good. So I
Right.
just try to kind of work with their idea of what they want to do musically with pieces of any style, from Baroque to contemporary, 21st century.
Hmm.
And I just ask a lot of questions, like if I don't understand something like they do, if I don't like it, I think your question is how one develops like comfortable interpretation that is being true to oneself, but at the same time true to the
Informed. Yeah.
right. Well, being true to oneself. Well, I think it's just. I think again, the desire has to be to do something with the music you play. Like you can't just play a piece of music
Right.
and just hope that it will work out. It's not enough to play all the right notes at the right time in tune with the dynamics that are written by composer.
Yeah.
Unless there are a couple of composers that it might actually work. But most composers need help with doing something else, looking beyond this. And so when once, then, hopefully when one plays on musical instrument, music has certain meaning to each person, and the meaning is different. And so each person then needs to think first about what the meaning of the pieces and what they want to project on this piece
Hmm.
to the audience, like what they like about this piece, what they project. And I think the authentic performance from point of view true to oneself comes along with authentic performance true to the piece. Because once you really try to think first and foremost about the audience or about what you want it to sound like, why you care so much about this piece, and if you don't care about the piece, you should think about why you don't care about this piece. You should start caring.
Right.
You have to do something with the music. And that's, I think, when the true interpretation for each person will come along.
Right. The storytelling aspect, basically, right?
Could be a storytelling if one thinks like that, or sometimes it's just an emotional journey. Could be
Hmm.
like that without any stories. Could be emotional state. Music is an emotional business in a way. I mean, so and
Hmm.
it's an emotional art. So it has to express something. And so, and again, combination of singing on an instrument and expressiveness and trying to find the meaning and actually communicate the feelings to the audience. Just working on being expressive enough that your feelings, actually, the feelings you're trying to express, are understood by your audience.
Right.
I think that is the key.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's just a playing, like you often hear, just a performance. Is it really true to oneself? Like if one just plays through the piece? Probably not really, unless somebody is, different people have different range of emotions, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Because like thinking back to it, when you go listen to a bunch of you could say broad students perform, but even just anyone performing, uh, for me at least, sometimes it's hard to have the emotional attachment, or any emotional understanding from many of them. But then you can have the emotional attachment, like if they're a close friend or a mentor or something, that's at least still like the music moved you because of this. But I think that also still inspires a challenge of like, okay, how does an artist really, I mean, touch the audience, right? How do they create a lasting impact?
But I
But I
think
think,
people have to really care and spend a lot of time thinking and practicing about what they want to bring to the audience and like then how they do it
right.
and just work on that. I unfortunately I went to quite a few professional recitals too that were just well played but not very well emotionally conveyed.
Yeah.
It's just basically just coming and hearing the notes at the right time, right order.
Yeah. And this kind of goes into something I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about social media a little bit. We talked about a concept there, but you also talked about kind of this aspect of the technical level of all musicians has risen. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
and it's an interesting thing because I've heard that, and I've also heard the technical level of musicians has dropped. So there's differing perspective on this um, in terms of artistry. And I think you were kind of saying that in terms of you went and saw this professional perform, and it was like hearing the right notes at the right times. Well, if you think back to, Oistrakh or Kogan and all of these people like that, well, that wasn't necessarily just hearing all the right notes at the right times. And maybe this this is a connect of the two topics you mentioned of social media and this high technical level of, let's call it, instrumental playing. Um, do you think that there's almost like hmm, a culture of perfection that's being bred of like we have to do,
Well, yeah, because of it's been for a long time because of recordings.
right.
Because recordings are like perfect, supposedly. So people have been thinking for a long time that the playing has to be perfect. But I have to say that I don't think that the level, technical level dropped.
Hmm.
Oh, artistic level, you said dropped.
Right.
I don't think it dropped. I think technical level has risen because of various aspects and also because of better teaching and better established system and people have opportunities and
Right.
so on.
Accessibility and everything like that, right?
Yes,
Hmm.
yeah, but I don't think I think on the elite level there are as few people or as many people right now playing interestingly and beautifully as before.
Mm,
Um, the level of average player has come up,
mm,
but average players, I mean, the average level was always average level. That's why there is average professional level, which is, pretty broad. And then at the top of the pyramid, there's elite level, which are players that are recognized by professional players that they stand out.
right.
I don't think that level has dropped. Um, it's just the technical level has become stronger, especially in viola,
Yeah.
uh, but also on violin, I guess, and on cello, just in general.
Hmm.
But in terms of social media, I think people just find more. It's focus on oneself that is nurtured by social media often if people do this a lot, and it kind of then justifies the feeling, okay, I have to feel comfortable. I have to feel comfortable on stage. I
Hmm.
will be at peace with it. Doesn't matter if I play this or that, as long as I'm comfortable. This is an achievement. Like this is what I want to feel. I want to come out and play, and I want to be comfortable with myself. Well, that's a good goal, but unfortunately, the audience doesn't care if one is comfortable with oneself unless they get something from the performance. And so
Right.
people have to be somewhat uncomfortable, or they have to do something else. It's like Yuma, for example, when he was remembering he was ego driven when in his when he was a student, and he came up and he was playing, and he was thinking, why am I doing this? Like, I'm bored, the audience is bored, like I have to do something else. I mean, what is the purpose of me doing this? I mean, of just being ego. So one has to actually do stuff with music to go beyond the boundaries. Then audience reacts, and
Yeah.
then neither performer nor audience are bored. And that's what it is all about. I think if we are musicians, especially the classical ones, we don't do improvisations on stage like jazz musicians. We actually play pre-rehearsed, pre-written performances, interpreting, and audience comes and listens. Sometimes they come to hear us for the first time. Like they come and hear pieces for the first time. They come and hear, for example, Brahms' sonata for the first time, and then the reaction could be, "Oh, I don't like Brahms' sonata." You know, this is like, how can one not like Brahms sonata? Well, because people actually don't realize, and performers also, how hearing a piece for the first time can influence a person's opinion. And I've heard
Yeah.
so many times how when somebody heard one piece some time ago and then they heard the same piece later and said, "Oh, I realize I actually like this piece." Well, I think the difference is that the first person who played it in a certain way, and this person played it in a way that communicated to the particular audience member, and now they like the piece. So we have responsibility
Yeah.
for conveying the music we're performing.
So as for the social media topic, I'm curious, what would you what would you like to see in that realm? Since it's probably never going to die away. Like social media is probably becoming more of a relevant thing with marketing or identity for artistic profiles and such like that. How would you how would you like to see it take form for like future artists or future musicians?
The social media like form what people should do, but I think in addition, I mean, we have some really outstanding young people who playing beautifully,
Hmm.
and we all know who they are. They're playing beautifully, winning competitions. Sometimes they are not winning competitions, but people still coming and hearing them play. I think it's just for generally for students. In addition, I guess, to social media, one has to be interested in broader aspects, like going to traveling, like maybe seeing more nature, like mountains and forests, and being interested in other people, like really cultivating the interest in other people, learning about other countries, maybe reading more, like
Hmm.
learning other stuff. I think it's very important for musicians, just having other interests outside of just narrow, this is B flat.
Yeah. You can be obsessed, but if you're obsessed with music with mm, no other interest to develop your character, then how can you be an artist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and actually to develop an interesting interpretation of a piece and to play something beautifully, one has to be an interesting person, I think.
Hmm.
Which brings us actually to yes or no thing, which is either one is interesting person or one is not so interesting person. And if one is not so interesting person, it's actually a double kind of meaning. It doesn't mean that this person is not interesting. Sometimes it means this person is shy and comes across as not interesting, but sometimes it's just a lack of interests. That's what I mean. Like the person, like is a person complex and complicated
Hmm.
overall? Like there is a complex set of emotions. Are there are thoughts about life and in general just going through one's mind, or no?
Right.
And usually people who are more complex, they have more interesting musical interpretations.
Yeah.
And then which brings actually, like sometimes when people drive and you see how one drives, sometimes that's the personality.
Yeah.
Like people can pretend They can, they can seem agitated and eager and optimistic and or whatever. But then when you see them drive, and they always drive very slowly and, for example, very carefully and so on, that's the personality. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just right there. The same thing is with performance. One can pretend and be outgoing or whatever, and just but when you hear somebody play, and we're talking about already when somebody has enough technical control. Of course, you can't judge that by when people don't have enough control, like technical abilities to play. But we're
Right.
talking about already a professional, like higher level students and professional. When you hear somebody play, that's who they are as people,
Yeah.
actually. So, I mean, just it is
Yeah.
what it is sometimes.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting concept because music is, I mean, you said something about music being subjective and intonation is objective, right? And it's true. Like, as much as we can talk about um vulnerability and how one should be and everything, people are going to have differing opinions. People are going to be different musicians. People are going to hate Brahms sonatas and people are going to enjoy Brahms sonatas. And that's,
Yes.
end of the day,
Hmm.
that's okay, right? But
Absolutely.
as artists, we should make it our goal to see what we can do to provide some form of meaning or enjoyment to the audience. And I think that's overlooked a lot, you know.
Yeah. It's kind of
Yeah.
our responsibility. Yeah. When people come to our concerts.
And I think part of it is a difference in culture, right? Like American culture, even more so now than it used to be, has less of a value on music or arts in any form. And unfortunately, now we're going to the point where pretty much anything that is outside of like business is losing value to the general population. And that's why social media has I've seen been such a rise for music. Like I don't know if you saw this. I know you don't use social media all this much, but Timothy Chalamet, the actor that I've really never seen in a movie before, but he said something about how he would be caught dead at watching an opera. And everyone got on his case about that and was like, "Oh, well, let's not support Timothy Chalamet." But that was the best marketing that music ever had, was someone saying that opera was so boring. And all the opera companies and all the orchestras were saying, "Oh, Timothy Chalamet, we would invite you to come see our concert if we hadn't sold out all of our tickets," or things like this. And it was great because it was like, well, first off, we're getting this like viral traction thing about music from this famous actor that was being a little bit of an asshole, but it's okay if he doesn't like opera. That's one thing. And
I know
secondly,
some other people who don't like opera. That's okay.
yeah, it's okay. But also like this rise of social media just taking over, I think that actually did fill the halls because people were being like, okay, well, what is this? Oh, that was funny. Let's see if and old people are saying all of the stupid memes like Atar is even saying the 6-7 meme if you've heard that. So social media is really taking a storm, and it's a good and bad thing. I am curious to see how it affects, I mean, especially my generation, and it's already had lasting effects in meeting
That's
people
what
and
I'm worried about. Just I'm not against social media. I'm
yeah,
just worried about specific effects on younger generation of social media.
me too, because it started when I was an undergrad, I think, of the comparison side, but also you can kind of put yourself in this bubble of mediocrity, maybe. I'll just be blunt, and you can be told that you're great by all these strangers and feel like all this external validation, and then you just get knocked on the floor by someone who knows what they're talking about, and that's okay, but are people really prepared for that when they enter the scene? You can have a lot of passion and build up, but there's also still a standard with music, even though it is subjective. And I think that's something we can definitely agree on with with the social media scene. It was really great to talk with
Yeah.
you. Um, and it was pleasure to hear all of your input. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
so
your
much
time.
for willing to talk to me. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you. It was nice to see you,
nice to see you too.
even though it's over internet.
Yeah. All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. You too, Jacob. Thank you. Bye bye.